Ladies and gentlemen, I am Pronago, bringing you a different kind of video. This is my Brood War workflow guide. It's going to basically talk about how I make projects, specifically campaigns usually, but you can abstract it to basically anything. This is, again, my workflow, and of course it's only accurate as of the time of recording, which is September 2018. It does not necessarily mean that this workflow is the best, that this workflow will work for you, and will be perfect for getting you into that flow state and having you do your best work or your most efficient work. So even I make changes to this all the time, especially if I'm trying to experiment to see if there's like an idea that I can improve, or if I have some new idea that I've never thought of before but I think would slot in perfectly. So I'm basically making this sort of public, documenting this in the public domain by request. So if you think something here is useful, why don't you try it out, see if it works for you. And of course, I can answer any questions that I don't end up somehow inadvertently answering in this video in the comment section below. Or you can just reach out to me privately. All right. So this is literally a PowerPoint presentation. So I hope you guys are strapped in. We're going to start with tools and programs that I use. Then we're going to go into the actual workflow / pipeline for how you produce content. And finally, we will be talking about resources for productivity, which is just stuff that I, have in the background. And I'll cover some things that aren't actually on the PowerPoint that I thought of just now. But for the most part, it'll be everything that's in the PowerPoint. So let's get into it. It's very lo-fi, no fancy editing. We're just going real dry here. So hope you guys enjoy. Let's start with tools and programs. The first thing we're going to talk about is mapping and modding, so the tools I use for those. Then we'll go into graphics, audio, resources, and videos, because these all have a part to play in the productions that I make. So let's start with mapping and modding. We're going to start with SEM-Draft 2. This is created by Suicidal Insanity. It is hands down the best map making tool out there. It is responsible for all of the maps made in the pro circuit from, I don't know, whenever SEM-Draft came about until now, and will be responsible for all of those in the future. There have been a few attempts with Starforge and CHK Draft to sort of usurp that, or at the very least compete in some way, but they were never finished, and they were never really candle holders, as you could say something like that. I'm sure that candle holder is a word or a phrase used by some people somewhere, and if not, we're going to make it so that it is. So that's your mapping tools. Next, you have the Python Modding Suite by Poicourt. This is for general modding. It covers basically everything, and I only need to supplement with 2 other programs, one of which being Firegraft, which I use for everything that's in those parentheses, button sets, tech tree changes like data requirements and stuff like that, and importing plugins, that sort of thing. Then we have GPTP, a general plugin template project. This is for C++ code that I get Voyager and iQuare to code for me, because I can't code, for plugin changes. No, in all seriousness, I just consult those 2 people before going ahead with my code, or if I have any problems at all, I don't try to solve them on my own at all. I just bother those people. So there you have it. Those are the hidden figures in my workflow. Then we have WinMPQ, which is the other supplementary program to the Python Modding Suite. It's currently, the issue with the Python Modding Suite, PyMPQ, is bugged when extracting audio files, WAVs, and, well, I guess it would just be all WAVs, but music and sound files and everything else. So I use WinMPQ for that, just as a supplementary thing. Hopefully it'll be fixed the next time I have to make a workflow update video or something, and I can say, hey, I no longer use WinMPQ. But so far I have to. I use Notepad++ for AI scripts, for dialogue, design notes, basically any sort of notation I have to write, and any sort of code that I have to write that isn't done in Visual Studio, which is what I use for GPTP. And I have been informed that Sublime 3 may be a superior, or at the very least an alternative program to use here, so it's really down to personal preference. Again, this is just what I use, not necessarily the best things to use. I would say the SEM-Draft and all of the actual Brood War specific modding stuff, that's all pretty good to use. And I use my phone to record design logs and to listen to design logs as well, and also sometimes to take notes if I'm away from my computer for whatever reason. And I use Sumace, but I don't really anymore, because I don't make Brood War, or rather remastered content anymore. I only make content on 161. But if I were to use, for whatever reason, need to make StarCraft remastered content, I would use Sumace by Nave. So yeah, that's it. As you can see, that was the full bit. So let's go into graphics. Photoshop, and that's it. Nothing else. I just use Photoshop. I have tried PaintShop Pro. I've tried GIMP 2, and neither of them were any good. So that's it. I mean, again, this is what I use. Maybe you're more familiar with Photoshop or with GIMP, then Photoshop, maybe you're more familiar with PaintShop Pro or whatever else, I use this. For audio, I use Audition 1.5 for voice acting and editing. I also use it to arrange music. And I use Audacity to record audio from the internet, because usually I have Audition open, but I guess I could use Audition too if I really wanted to. 1.5 is easy to find. Audition, that is easy to find on a couple of Pirate Bay and stuff. So if you really need to find it, because that's the version that you want to use too. I know that I think 2 was okay, but I don't remember using it too much. Maybe 3. I don't remember which one it was. One of them was okay, like one of the later versions was okay and still worked with some of the old plugins, but that's why I use 1.5, is because like a lot of the old plugins that I use on basically on Mesk's recommendation, Escato Mesk, recommended some plugins that are only compatible with 1.5 as far as I'm aware, so that's why I use them. Then I use Music Shake for the actual music composition. I may become a big boy later and use something that isn't like a freeware fucking Korean internet program, but right now this is what I use. I have no idea if I'll upgrade to, again, become a big boy, as the note says, by using something that's a bit more, I don't know, like Fruity Loops or something like that. I'm not really sure what the programs would be best for this. I make music that is very specifically catered to what I want to do, and so it's probably not going to be the same stuff that you make if you use it, or that you use if you do make music. Now let's talk about videos. This is the last topic of the tools and programs section. I use Open Broadcast software. I don't remember which one it is. OBS for recording and streaming. This is really important for when I'm streaming playthroughs to somebody who's not going to play, but still can potentially give me feedback if I'm streaming my own test or something. Also very useful if I'm recording a video that I then can look back at, or that I can upload and, again, share with other people who don't play, but can still give me feedback on voice acting and such. Then there's Handbrake, which is a pretty useful tool for basic compression, especially lately without internet. I've been using my phone to upload all my videos, so unless it's going to be something that's edited, if it's just a run, like a dry OBS run like this, or like any of my playthroughs, I use Handbrake to compress it, and then I just throw it on my phone and upload it there. So pretty useful there. Sony Vegas for editing. This is the only program I'm familiar with. I have tried Premiere. I didn't like it as much, but it's more useful if you're also using Photoshop and After Effects. I use Megui and Debug Mode Frame Server, which is a plugin for Vegas, to encode the Vegas edits at a high enough quality where it's not going to completely destroy me to go back and watch the video afterwards. And also has the added benefit of compressing them a bit more properly than Handbrake does. Let's talk about resources. This is the real last discussion for this particular section. I use the Sen DLDB, that's the Starnet Network Download Database, that Voyager has maintained pretty actively lately, and basically has most of the Maplantis stuff. I also have the Maplantis DB that I've gone through and named everything, and that should be on my Mega somewhere, so check the description for a link for that. The pinned links in Nubor on my Discord server are also really useful. I consult those very regularly when I had internet anyways. And, I'll open up like the command guide, the extended command guide that for like Nave and iQuery's commands, but also the one that Necron made for the basic AI commands. I'll consult a bunch of other things that are there. DF's resources for colors and such. Pretty useful for when I'm making my own player colors in Photoshop. So I basically consult all that stuff. Obviously use all of those plugins, or many of those plugins, in my day-to-day modding and mapping adventures. Then for sounds, I find that the BizArchivist sound project, also linked in the description, is pretty useful. This is like a Steam forum project, or at least what I found out about it through the Steam forums. Extracts a lot of sounds from video games. You can sift through and find ones that you like, edit them aggressively, because usually they're pretty fucked up when you get them, because nobody has any idea how to be a sound engineer anymore. Nobody's hired for that purpose in modern games. So I usually go to the older games, like the Fear games, some other stuff that I remember having a good to decent sound design, and then I edit the sounds based on that, and I use them in my projects. I also have, there's like many other sound resources, soundsresource.com, and then there's like a tabletop sounds. Let me get you the actual notation here, because I have this listed somewhere. So there's, like I said, soundsresource.com. There's Tabletop Audio, which is tabletopaudio.com. I'll probably toss a bunch of other things in the description that I don't personally use too often, but I have it on good authority that they're actually pretty good. So yeah, I'll sift through that as time goes on. So that's it for the tools and programs. That's the rundown for all of the different things that I use, some more often than others. Like obviously I use SCM Draft basically every day, but the plugins I may only mess around with once a week or something. It really just depends on what I'm doing. Obviously I don't use sounds every day, but when I'm getting into the audio stages of my project's development, that is when I would use those. Now, let's talk about workflow. So we're going to talk about the directory structure, then we're going to move on to production, eventually moving on to testing, and then releasing your project. Now let's talk about directory structure. Here's an example from Project Hydra. It has the AI, audio, graphics, mod, and promo folders, and then some shit for the the project itself, the bat file that compiles it all for SCR, etc. So basically, my directory structure looks very similar to this in every production. I might not have like the summase file, obviously, because I'm working 161 now, but active projects get folders on my desktop, which contain the AI, which is level design notes, AI scripts, audio, voice acting, music, sound effects. Each map has its own folder, so if we were to click on the audio folder here, which I won't do because it's not actually a folder, it's an image, you would see like Mission 1, Mission 2, Mission 3, all in their own folders for all of the transmissions there. Obviously, that folder would be a lot bigger and a bit more active if there was, I guess, if there was any like custom voice acting besides Ahmed in Project Hydra. Then there's the graphics, which is for units, effects, terrain, user interface. Also a very empty folder for Hydra. Very little stuff in there because I didn't end up really messing around with graphics too much, but it has like the modified command icons and wireframes and stuff. Then there's mod, which is the actual mod files, like units.dat. Sometimes I'll organize these further, like the tile sets and unit graphics will probably go in their own folder called tile set and unit, but for the most part, I just mix like the data files, .dat, and the res files, like the TBL files, basically for unit names and all that stuff. iScripts, AI scripts, all that stuff usually just gets thrown into the base folder. Then we have promo, which is for screenshots and trailer footage, stuff that I'm going to throw on the announcement thread, somewhat like disseminate via YouTube or my Discord server, post on the release party, something like that. So that's how I structure my directories. Moving on to production. This is the biggest part of any project. This is where you'll be spending most of your time. This is what I have worked on the most out of everything else. Everything else is gravy. Structuring your directory so that it looks nice and it works properly. That's great. That will help you pretty. That'll be a pretty big boon for basically reducing the amount of time that you have to sort of battle with whatever you're working with in order to get into that flow state. But production is where you're going to be spending the most of your time, so it's the biggest part of any project. Now, the first phase of production is called the discovery phase. That's what I've been calling it. Basically, I figure out, hey, I have an idea for a project, or hey, there's an old idea that I had a long time ago that I want to try to investigate again. Let's take a look at it. So this is ideas and design logs on the phone, on Notepad++, wherever I'm going to throw them on. Usually a lot of recorded ideas where I'll record some ideas that I have verbally, and then I will listen back to it at double speed and take notes later on or something like that. And this is where I'm basically just riffing on my ideas, trying to develop them into further, basically more fleshed out stuff. And since I always have other projects that are already past the discovery phase to work on, I can usually work on those while I get the discovery phase done for other projects. After that, this is also when, discovery phase is also when there's a lot of like work done on the file structure, basically carving out a space for it on my desktop, or if I don't think it's going to be an active project immediately, I'll still take the notes and put the logs in different folders and stuff, like basically organize the eventual folder structure. Now, then we have map design. This is like actually opening up SCM Draft and working on the design, figuring out like what the locale is, what the setting is, what the objective of the mission is, not just for the player, but also like what purpose does this mission serve in the story, in the gameplay, like what kind of challenge am I going to be posing at people, etc. For this process, I usually have the design logs of the project, or music, or podcasts and lectures and whatever else in the background. That helps me work, and I'll get into those in the final section of the entire PowerPoint. Then there's the required mod work. So this is just basically I figure out, I get a list of things that I need to mod, be it custom tiles, custom unit graphics, new unit behaviors through plugin code, obviously the AI scripts and stuff, whatever else I have to put together, request command art from Darkened Fantasies, that sort of thing. I get a list of all that stuff that I'm going to need for, say, map 1, and then I just basically chip away at that list until there's nothing there. Usually the first map requires the most amount of initial mod work because it's also the first time you're working on the mod for the project overall, unless you're like making a campaign for a total conversion that's already been done or something. But that's usually where a bulk of the mod work is done, and then I just sort of chip away at whatever's left based on what other maps need to be done. Then there's the AI scripts, the layout, the decor, and the triggers of the map itself. This is usually with just music in the background. I find that podcasts distract me when I'm trying to write stuff down or really focus on something. Design, like map design, I don't really mind having podcasts or design logs in there. Design logs obviously help because they give me ideas while I'm working on it. Podcasts are nice ambience that, especially if I don't have like as much music as I would like to listen to, then I'll listen to a podcast instead. But for the most part, map design is easier for me to just sort of freehand, and then I can make layout changes that are a bit more focused with just music, thinking very actively and intently about the production itself. Then there's script writing. I have nothing in the background for this. I usually talk my way through what the purpose of the lines are very articulately, almost as if I was recording something, but I'm not. So I probably look like a crazy person, but whatever, I look like that anyways. And so this usually has me reading the lines out loud and basically giving like voice acting demos that aren't being recorded. And maybe I do record them just to listen back to them and see what they would sound like trial run voice acting to see, okay, is the script good? Like, does it make sense? And of course, in combined with the triggers, I actually put these scripts, like whatever I've script written for the dialogue. This is stuff gets put into the map, and I don't actually have any audio in there yet, so it's all like combeep.wav or whatever. Now then there's the first tests, which are recorded with OBS. There's nothing in the background. I'm very focused on looking for any problems, but also like trying to play my game as if this was a released product with no problems, taking note of problems, but that's what the recording is there for, so I can go back and catch any issues. Mostly I'm just trying to focus on playing the game the way that I expect other players to, very seriously, trying to win, trying to, get the most efficient thing, maybe see if there's like cheesy things that you can do to really abuse the AI, or maybe see if the AI is unfair or something like that. And then I would move on to the next map in the project after those tests were done, and I had tweaked the map a little bit. Again, the map is not perfect. It's just got the first tests done, doesn't even have audio in it yet. The triggers aren't complete because there's no music in or whatever else, and so on and so forth. But I move on to the next map in the project until every single map in the production is done, quote unquote. Basically all of these steps from the discovery phase, well, I guess from the map design phase, because the discovery phase is more about the overall project, and then there's production from everything else. But the map design to the first test, when all of that stuff is done for all of the projects, then I get into the polish and end stage phase of the design. So this includes audio, voice acting, music, soundstage, figuring out what I'm going to do with the briefing, figuring out what I'm going to do with, I've already script written the briefing, obviously, but I figure out how I'm going to trigger the briefing with the sounds and stuff. There's nothing in the background for this phase. Obviously, I'm working with audio, so I need to be able to intently listen for any problems with it. Then we move on to end stage polish, which is usually with music or nothing in the background. The reason I say maybe there's nothing is because there's a lot of like testing and editing minor things like AI or the map, and then rebooting the exe and testing again. And since I'm in the middle of testing and recording stuff, it usually gets a little weird having music in the background for that, especially since I'm going to be listening for like the music and voice acting and other audio elements while testing, and probably working with more of those as well in the end stage polish phase. So music is really rare to happen in this particular area. And then there's the pre-release test of the entire project. And I basically, after I feel like I've done that end stage polish phase for all of the maps from map 1 to the end, then I say, okay, maybe I take like a day or two break or something, but then when I come back, or maybe I don't take a break at all, I test the entire production from head to toe, catching any final issues that I see, making any final notes, obviously recording this whole thing, and then going back and looking at it. And then, once I feel like the project is basically release ready, in a sense, I release it to my private testers, DF, iQuare, Necron, etc., who will then go and take a look, and we'll get into that now, actually. That's the testing phase. So this is, again, only sent to others when the entire project is done. Obviously, for other people who don't have access to early testers, if they don't want to worry about testing, if they just want to do everything that in the production phase without sending it to the testers, then of course they can just release it at this point. But this is what I do: is I send it to. I have the luxury of having testers, so I send this stuff. I ask testers to record their playthroughs of all of the entire production whenever they can. I expect that this process usually takes about like a month, and then they just give me feedback and send me their recordings whenever they have them. I take a break. This is a few days to a week after sending them the stuff. And then I come back. I make tweaks based on tester feedback, assuming, the break really is important here, because not only are you going to be a little bordering on being burnt out for the fact that you've been working on this for so long, because again, production takes 6 months to a year for some projects, probably longer for others. And so when you're working with something like that, you should take a break. You should reward yourself for getting it to this point in the production. And then when you come back, you can more honestly assess the entire production and also assess the feedback that testers are giving you, because you won't be so in the moment, right? You'll have basically had time to meditate and clear your mind of that sort of stuff. So this is really important to take a break at this point, and take breaks throughout. Obviously, I take breaks very frequently for a day or two, work on something else, work on videos instead of productions, whatever the case may be. That's what I'm doing right now. I've just released Hydra. I was working on Nemesis Chain. I said, wait, I feel like I'm getting burnt out here. Let me work on some one-shots very casually. Let me take a break, and I'll come back to Nemesis Chain. I'll come back to other things when I get internet back, whenever I feel is necessary. So instead, I'm going to focus on videos, and that's what I'm doing now. And so I have the luxury of having a whole multitude of hobbies that I can work on and still feel like I'm creatively satisfying myself. Thankfully, that has not yet exhausted itself. So maybe that will change. Again, if that does, I'll have to release an update to this video, I guess. But that's basically how I work in terms of breaking and not breaking. But after my break in the testing phase, at this point, I'm all in. I mean, obviously, I'm all in because the production phase is done. So the testing phase basically has me test the entire production again after my break, and then I rinse and repeat. So this means without the break, or with way less of a break, like a shorter break, I wait for the testers to give me more feedback, and basically on the changes that I've made and the new cut of the project, and then I test it again completely until I'm satisfied. So this could be one more time. Maybe there's no time necessary. Maybe the first round of testing is fine, and for whatever reason, my testers have no suggestions for improvement. They think it's all great. Yes, epic. Go ahead and put it out there. In which case, I guess I would just, do my final test after my break of the entire production from head to toe, and then I would say, okay, it's ready for release. But until I'm satisfied, I test it, I have my testers test it, and I continue to tweak stuff. And again, when I'm satisfied, when I feel it's a release-worthy project, that's when I release. So let's talk about releasing. Trailer. This is a big deal. So usually this is something that I can work on during my break. Obviously, I say I'm taking a break, but it's taking a break from testing and doing that grueling procedure of repeatedly opening up the same map and playing it different ways, forcing yourself to try to play it different ways. This is why testers are really important, obviously. The trailer is pretty good too. Obviously, there's maybe you haven't done your credits section of your map at this point. Maybe you would do that here as well, but I usually just throw it in there anyways. Which is funny because obviously for my next set of productions, my testers will get to the end of the campaign, see the credits list, and see themselves in the credits before they've actually, technically they have tested it at that point, but also technically their names are in the credit section before they even test it, which is kind of funny, but whatever. I still give them, they tested my other stuff too, so that's fine. I still give them their accolades. So the trailer requires script writing, voice acting, and video editing, so going back to the tools and programs and stuff, that's obviously pretty important. Now, when it comes to the trailer itself, I usually just try to make something that I feel imparts the themes and central, basically the purpose of the campaign, and essentially gives people an honest look at what they can get into, what they can expect, what they're going to get into when they download and play this epic 161 campaign, and go through all of the hassle of downloading a 1 gigabyte file that installs 161 for them. Very big hassle, obviously. No sarcasm at all. So once they do that and they play it, basically the trailer won't be dishonest. Or if it is dishonest for some reason, it'll be it'll be worth it. It'll be part of a twist where a subversion of expectations. It'll feel more honest than just lying to them, right? So the trailer has to be reasonable, obviously. Then there's a release party. Once the trailer is done, once the campaign is done, etc., I release the trailer. I make a thread on starredit.net and a thread on Team Liquid. I may decide to just stop reaching out to anybody with these forums, or maybe stop just posting on Sen, only post it on Team Liquid. I don't know yet. But what I do know is that I will be always posting it on my YouTube channel. Obviously, the trailer itself on my YouTube channel is a big deal. Pretty indicative of a release. And then obviously disseminating it on my Discord server is another thing that I do. Then I hurry up and wait for bug reports and feedback. So this is where, the trailer is done, your project is done, it's out there, but, of course, you're going to get some people who weren't the testers, and you can value some of their feedback or decide to not value their feedback at all, depending on your point of view. And so this would be where you're sending it out there and waiting for those people to play your campaign, comment on YouTube videos, like YouTube playthroughs of your production, whatever. And yeah, that's basically it. There's always going to be some minor patches to fix issues, but it's mostly done at this point. Like, you've done like 99.999 repeating % of the work. At this point, it's just, you're going to lean back, reap the benefits, maybe take a break, and then get ready to work on the next project. So there you have it. Let's talk about resources for productivity, because this is really the tail end of stuff. So we're going to go over music and podcasts/lectures. So for music, I use these YouTube channels. I use the Confused Byproduct of a Misinformed Culture. It's a very long, perhaps melodramatic channel name, but they make good mixes. So this is electronic plus. There's like more stuff other than electronic. They do like some funk and some jazz and whatever else, but for, their big ticket item is their electronic stuff, synthwave, witch house, whatever. Then there's Odysseus, which is synthwave and more. Sometimes they'll do chill pop or whatever. I don't even know what chill wave, whatever the fuck they call it. I don't follow these genres. They're all dumb, but they sound good. And then there's Epicurus, which does electronic, and they're a little bit more infrequent. Odysseus, and especially Odysseus, but as of right now, Confused Byproduct as well, are pretty active with the mixes that they put out. Epicurus is like, you'll get them like a couple times a year, but still pretty useful to listen to. The 80s guy is a bit more prolific as well. He does electronic. I assume he's a guy based on his YouTube channel. Then there's the Stoned Meadow of Doom for underground rock and metal. This is more on the ambient side. You can, for most releases, you can just put it on and sort of let the droning nature of a lot of the music that they put out there sort of sink into your subconscious as you work. And that can also be useful for when you're not as energetic and you don't really feel like you want to be energetic, but you still want to work. Well, maybe that can help you. Really just depends on your own personal preferences. For underground hip-hop, I turn to Fool's Gold Records. I'm sure there's like a bunch of other mixes that I could go to, a bunch of other artists or YouTube channels that I could look at for this, but I'm very I'm not as well versed on this particular thing, but I found them and found a couple of songs that I liked. They only release like individual songs. They don't release mixes. So it's a little bit less useful for like prolonged streaming or recording or working or whatever, but still useful sometimes. And then there's Bohren and their Club of Gore. This is not just an Echoes joke. I actually do listen to these guys somewhat infrequently. I used to listen to them a lot more, but they are lo-fi ambient jazz. So if you're into that, listen to them. There's also, of course, plenty of other channels and artists you could look up. You can just type in like whatever genre of music I like, mix. And then you can, or like 1 hour mix, 2 hour mix, whatever. And you'll find plenty of mixes that are like that. And, some of them will be less frequently less frequent uploaders than others. Some channels will be more prolific than others, and some of them will have higher quality mixes than others. But for the most part, it's actually not about the quality of the songs. It's really just you're using this music as background to help you focus on what you're working on. And this works for me at the very least. Let's talk about podcasts and lectures, and then we'll wrap this baby up. The Joe Rogan Experience. Hi everybody, Joe Rogan all day, fight by night or something. I don't know. But he's a pretty cool guy. He's pretty prolific, especially sometimes like in the past week or so, he's put out a lot of podcasts. Just did Elon Musk, so obviously pretty big deal there. He's a cool guy. He makes some pretty long form podcasts. So if you're just into podcasts more so than music, or if you're in the mood for a podcast, put that on while you work. That's what I do. There's also the Duncan Trussell Family Hour. Duncan Trussell's pretty funny. I think he's probably brain damaged or something, but he's pretty fun to listen to. So he's all about love and peace, man. So give him a kiss. Jordan B. Peterson, a bit of a firebrand in some circles, depending on your political point of view, but I feel that his non-political lectures about the Bible and stuff are pretty interesting, even if I don't buy into the whole religion stuff. So I would suggest, if you're not offended or miffed or whatever about the politics of the person, if you don't really give a shit about that stuff, you just want something interesting and compelling and potentially life-altering or improving to listen to, you can take a listen to those with or without the work that you're doing. You might want to focus a bit more on his stuff if you put more stock in him. But he's helped me out. So then there's Brett Weinstein. He's more interesting. I don't know. Do you say Weinstein? Whatever. Not Harvey Weinstein's brother. Brett Weinstein. I would say that Eric Weinstein is probably pretty useful as well, but his YouTube channel isn't as out there. And I would also say, I didn't put it on this list, but Sam Harris is also pretty useful for some stuff. I'm not as familiar with his work, but I feel like his podcast would be, it's like Waking Up or something. His podcast would be pretty useful as well. Brett Weinstein doesn't have a podcast, but he's made a lot of appearances. His own YouTube channel has a lot of his own lectures, so interesting fellow to listen to. Then for esports, there's Return of By the Numbers. I'm really into Counter-Strike esports, so I listen to Richard Lewis and Thorin talk about that. Then Thorin has his own podcast or talk show, I guess, called Counterpoints. So I listen to that sometimes. And of course, Thorin's Esports Salon is also another one for general esports. So if you want to just have some generic shit about esports talking, it's actually pretty funny. You could, boot up any one of these, especially Return of the By the Numbers has a huge amount of banter, fucking hilarious stuff. So of course, shout out to them. And of course, there's audiobooks, especially War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Not Art of War by whatever that Asian guy was. But War of Art is way better, way more important. Not as influential and best-selling. Are you fucking kidding me? Who's calling me in the middle of this? Die. So, audiobooks, War of Art, Stephen Pressfield, take a look at it. All right, as you can see, based on that phone call, I have to go. This has been Brood War Workflow. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you got something out of it. Read War of Art or listen to it at double speed like I do. And, that'll be it. Bye.